You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Process Fixer. Help you see the bigger picture. Derrick Mains is the elixir, cutting waste away like scissor. Woo!
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Process Fixer. Today, I'm excited to have a guest. A lot of times it's just me being the talking head on this show, but I've got James Malley with me today from Paccurate. And the last 10 minutes or so, we have been having all sorts of great conversation about logistics and supply chain and sustainability. James, welcome. It's good to have you. You're usually a Brooklyn guy, but sounds like Denver this week.
That's right. I'm coming at you pre-recorded, not live from my in-laws' basement. So.
You know, that's the great thing about technology these days is that it's really relatively easy to do this. I actually have a motorhome and I'm getting ready to go on the road for maybe a few weeks and just take the show on the road, you know, and grab some guests across the country, but be able to do whatever you want to do because, you know, the mobile aspects of our lives.
Nice.
Well, it's good to have you. Say that again.
Stop by Brooklyn.
Yeah, so maybe I'll swing through Brooklyn. I used to run a business in Manhattan many years ago, so I'm not as familiar with Brooklyn, but a lot more familiar with Manhattan itself. But listen, it's great to have you. I'd love to talk about Paccurate because a lot of people know from this show I talk about efficiency all the time. It is everything and anything that we do. We are very, very firm believers at the Process Fixer that there's inputs of the business, there's the outputs of the business, the product you ship, right? The sales orders you get, the product you ship. But where most profit is lost and where most waste is created is in the throughput aspect. It is all of the things that you're not thinking about that aren't showing up on your P&L as a, you know, the revenue number or the bottom line number. It's the sandwich part in the middle. And in looking at Paccurate, I feel like you really fall into that place, right? You're using AI to make some determinations on the best way to ship a product, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Typically in real time, our software looks at an order and figures out exactly how to pack it for that particular shipment.
So is it looking at that based upon dimensions? Is that using a camera? Like what's that? Take me through. Okay, I've just placed my order, right?
Sure.
How does that work as far as where your system and your software comes into play?
Sure. So if you take it from that angle, you place an order. At some point, that order ends up probably in a warehouse management system, which is going to tell the folks on the floor it's time to grab these things from the shelf and put them in a box. And so when that determination happens of what box should I use or boxes should I use, our customers make a quick call to our API and we send back packing instructions with a picture of how those items should be put in the box or boxes. So it's a little bit like 3D Tetris on demand.
So do you have all the dimensions in your system? Is that where you're getting all that from? And you're figuring out the mathematics of how to fit the square peg in the round hole?
Yeah, I mean, without going too down the rabbit hole.
We can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want. I'm good.
Sure. So our kind of vision was to stay out of everybody's way. We wanted to just be a stateless API. So we never want to be the system of record or try to compete with these, massive WMS systems. So every time they want, a packing plan, they send the dimensions from their systems, as well as any relevant information like item rules. This is fragile. This can stack, roll, all these things. Often they'll send their carrier rate tables and any other kind of costs they've defined, like the cost of corrugate or labor cost. And so our engine basically takes all that in and in milliseconds spits back out those packing instructions.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit more about this in the sense of like real use cases. So this is happening in real time, right? So via API, and is this a separate? Are you integrated into their Shopify, like their WooCommerce, or how does that work?
We can be. I mean, one of the kind of blessings and curses of being an API that's just sort of open, like anybody can come use our API for free, actually. You can just like sign up. So I'd say half of our customers we've never even really spoken to. They just start cranking away at it. But yeah, we do have folks calling it from, the online shopping cart because kind of mind-boggling. But if they can't, if you can't charge, if you can't offer free shipping, usually the shipping charge is based on like very basic logic, like quantity of items, or like you hope that you're not gonna lose money on any given shipment.
I mean, most companies, and just to explain how this works for listeners that don't know, most companies create some sort of shipping matrix. It has a very, very limited amount of features and functions. It might have your zones in one area, it might have your weights or dimensionals on the other, but it's pretty basic and it's complicated. Even with fat scooters. I mean, we built one in a little Excel spreadsheet that was like, zone 1, we're just going to charge 150, zone 2, 200, zone 3, 250, right? I mean, that's all we did was just break it down like that. And then as shipping costs changed and surcharges and fuel surcharge and all these sort of things started happening, particularly during the pandemic, very quickly we realized, we're losing money on shipping.
Right. And in the defense of that approach, when you're setting up your business and you're trying to figure out how to do these things, it's only one of like 100 issues that you have to fix. So that's very often how it happens. And a lot of the folks, even large kind of department store brands that use our API in their shopping cart, that's what they were doing previously. And they would have orders where somebody would be like, oh, great, $30 flat shipping, but they would order like 18 duvets. And so
now it's like you're screwed.
Yeah, the retailer would lose like thousands of dollars on a single order. So anyway, with a little bit of foreknowledge into what is the shipment actually going to look like, you can actually kind of charge appropriately for it.
That's right. So how do you make your money? Because you're like, oh, just go to the website, it's free. I'm like, well, wait a second. That isn't a very capitalistic approach, James. What's wrong with you here?
It's not a public service. No, you can go on and try it for free. So we have lots of a lot of a lot of students come on and build some really cool things with it. We even had somebody recently build like a vertical farm plan using our cartonization logic and our diagrams that we generate. It's pretty cool. But no, we typically charge per shipment, like a few cents.
Right. That makes sense. And is this just parcel freight, or are you doing LTL and full truckload yet as well?
Well, we focus on parcel because it's where we can drive not just the most kind of savings, but the most counterintuitive and kind of interesting savings that folks don't really anticipate. But we do, some of our customers that we started with parcel, they've gone on to start using it for pallets and the load planning, even some interesting inbound applications, measuring out like their vendors' shipments to them, the trucks that they send in. So it doesn't really, like, the engine doesn't really care what the container is, as long as you have the proper kind of controls in place that define that container.
Yeah. And how did this come about? Tell me a little bit about that, because you told me, I read in your bio, you're a theater guy. So what were you trying to pack as many actors on the stage as possible? What was the catalyst point here?
Well, you're outing me as a theater kid on your show.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's no shame. No, I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. But no, I thought I was going to be an actor in high school. I was a little bit of a big fish, small pond syndrome. Got to the big leagues and realized I was maybe average, and that's not as fun. So
no, that's not.
I would make websites for theater companies, like off-Broadway theater companies, for beer money, effectively. And by the time I graduated, I realized I enjoyed that more. And that's never a good sign, because if you want to make it as an actor, you have to be kind of hell-bent on making it happen. So
you really do.
Yeah. So myself and a buddy from high school, we just started taking on increasingly complex development projects, and eventually found our way into logistics technology.
Nice. And so you found your way into logistics technology. You started to build up the application. Was this the original intent? Was it about sustainability and reducing? No. What was the original intent?
So we started as contractors. So we would get thrown the work that nobody else wanted to do, which is, you can imagine that gets a little exhausting after a while. But but one of the benefits is we built these great relationships with real shippers, like people that are dealing with real problems, and they're really generous with sharing the details there.
Sure. Yeah.
And
sorry
so,
about that. I my phone rang right in the middle of this. Of course, it's like, what the heck? Sorry.
I'm just making sure my cell phone's silent.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Now's a good time to check. And I thought it's funny because I don't know how mine got off silent. Interesting. All right. Well, whatever. So yeah, you were saying.
So this was just one of those things, when we were kind of looking for something that we could own and build ourselves instead of just taking all these commission projects. It was around the same time that FedEx and UPS and the other carriers were starting to penalize bad packing. And a lot of these shippers were trying to use the cartonization features in their warehouse management systems and other things. And it wasn't working out. So we just took a stab at it, and we weren't really, we're kind of aware of the sustainability implications of the project, but it wasn't really until we got larger customers with big data sets that we kind of backed into this realization of like, wait a second, we're able to measure acres of cardboard saved, hundreds of truck trips. Like it's kind of mind-boggling how inefficient, especially e-commerce supply chain, but supply chain in general is.
Well, I think for the most part, I ran a electronics company for years that shipped products all over the country and world, and I think we had 5 boxes that we stocked, and there were lots of times, if we ran out of a box, or if something was in between, or we had an idiot working in the shipping department, which occasionally. Usually they were relatives of mine, though. That's the thing that always threw me off. It's like they're putting the micro SD card in the biggest box possible, and then we're getting nailed with dim weights and all sorts of things. And those are fees that you do not want to. You don't want those. I mean, they are really, really expensive. Something that could have been $2 or $3 is now $200 or $300 really quickly because you've taken up space. And I think a lot of people that don't understand shipping don't understand that. Yes, weight is important, but more importantly is actually the space that takes up in a trailer.
Right. Yeah. And just to defend your relatives a little bit.
Yeah.
So those packing mistakes.
There's no defense. Yeah.
those packing mistakes, they happen. And it's often due to, like you said, supply chain issues, keeping the right boxes in stock and all these things. But that's really the only real life experience your customers have with you if you're an e-commerce company. And so we've all, there's all these like online, communities that have popped up shaming bad packing just within the last 6 months. It's crazy. But when, in like a fast-paced environment, it's not really fair to punish, to be mad at the packer because humans are just like bad at looking at three-dimensional space or looking at a three-dimensional object and conceptualizing how well it can fit.
There's a reason one of the first things that we teach kids is that little pegboard with the star and the try, right? Because we suck at this. Like we don't just look at it. We have to literally try, to try to put the peg in the hole until it sort of clicks in our head that this isn't going to work. But when you bring stress into that situation, people defer back to that, to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. And it really what we didn't realize when we started, but we quickly found out is that those exceptions, the ones that get like shamed on social media, obviously not great, but they're the exception. There's actually far more potential for, a more sustainable packing in your average shipment. The ones that we would look at and say, oh, that's fine. I'll haul that thing out in my recycling when I'm done.
There's only 10% wasted space. It's not 90% wasted space. And those 10% add up, particularly when you're the manufacturer or you're the one that's footing the bill for it. That's where, the lost profit for most companies is in the margins. It's not, and when I mean margins, I'm not just talking about the bottom line margin. I'm talking about the margins of the page. It's not the easy stuff to see. It's the things that you just don't see. I've seen this happen with packaging many, many times. I've seen companies that are, I had a company a few years back that were selling a very high end product, and they were just bubble wrapping just like crazy amounts of bubble wrap around this thing and then putting it into larger packaging. And we were like, we got a spray foam machine, and you just put a bag in there, you press the button and it filled it up, and there was no movement of that product, and we could go to a smaller box. And, it was easier to handle, and you use less tape, and there's just all sorts of benefits. You could store more of them. They were cheaper, and those things will go right to the bottom line, right? Those are directly affecting profitability of the company.
Absolutely. I mean, especially home goods brands, when they just really overdo it on the protective material, I have a lot of empathy for that, because especially if there's a sustainability minded brand, returns are devastating. I mean, you're taxing the transport network with it coming back. It might end up in a landfill. So erring on the side of an egregious amount of bubble wrap, I think is understandable. But what we try to do is help quantify fragility. So work with the, the product engineers, work with the, the packaging engineers, and say, what is actually the right amount? So we're not blowing all this plastic or crinkle paper out the door every day, because it can really add up.
And, anybody who buys anything online, as I do, knows that Amazon is sort of notorious for this, right? I mean, I have more of those bubble packs in my garage than I have cardboard. There's many times I open up this big box and it's 2 or 3 things in there, and you're like, I get it. They had to fill the space for some reason. The other boxes were located too far away, or whatever that might have been. Maybe tell me, James, just in the last few minutes here, let's talk about a use case, right? So you talked about, the positioning of the things. And I understand that on a pallet perspective of restacking a pallet to make it more efficient and to get the maximum amount of items on there. When you're talking about doing that in a box, though, are you looking at the three items that I purchased, and you're figuring out dimensionally the Tetris game of how that fits into a smaller package, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the image that we send back that show where those items should go, and where any, if it's cold chain, where any gel packs should go, et cetera. That's mostly just to be there as a guide, as a quick glance for the packer to make sure they have the right items and they're putting them generally in the right box. I think what we, the real reason Paccurate exists is so we could navigate those kind of counterintuitive packing solutions, where, we have people, new time customers, usually newer customers, will say, this can't be right. Paccurate said to put this in 13 boxes. We would normally put it in 9. And we say, well, let's take a look, and we'll do the math. And it shows, this much less corrugate, this many hundreds of dollars cheaper, all these things because of this, that, and the other thing. So it's more for when those instances do come up, when we're finding that weird and counterintuitive packing solution every 30 shipments. It's so they can be okay, I'm not crazy. This is what they're talking about. Yeah.
This is so important, the data analyst aspect of this type of work. And it's critical, because we do, as human beings, tend to make decisions based upon our preconceptions and our biases. And, I have a client right now where we're comparing 2 pieces of software, and I have half the people in one group and half the people in the other saying, this is the best, this is the best, this is the best. My team went and created an Excel spreadsheet where they see each feature and they select how important it is to them. And then it creates a score, and then it rolls up all the scores from all those people. And it essentially says, this is your choice. And now you could argue that that's not the choice, but according to what you said, it is the choice. The data actually told you that is the right thing to do, which makes it so that you don't have to be the decision maker. You let the data, you let the AI do the thinking and the work like that. And I think you're right. People don't think about the nuances. And I was in the freight and logistics business for years, and particularly here in a market like Phoenix, we would see very interesting things in an outbound shipping market here in Phoenix, where now this is, partial truck and LTL and FTL, but we would see certain times of the year where rates would drop to a point where it was it was ridiculous. I mean, there were times in Phoenix for many, many years, because of the way that this market consumes and doesn't export a lot of things, that it was cheaper to put one pallet on a full truck than it was to put it in a truck with a bunch of other pallets. And people would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's because you're not thinking about the data of the relocation of that truck to, Long Beach, and they need it there the next morning, and they really don't care, about making money. They're just trying to get their truck back there and trying to offset some of the cost. That's, I think, the benefit of being able to look at that matrix, look at the dimensions, look at all the data, and let the data actually speak for you versus you coming up with a decision based upon, well, it looks and it feels like it should go in this box.
Right, because it feels right. Yeah, but I think, what you're describing is exactly why I think it's safe to say you're probably as much of a supply chain nerd as I am based on
totally.
Your
Oh God, yes.
But this is why. I mean, there's so many ripple effect elements of supply chain where you change one little thing and all of a sudden, wait a second, you didn't think about this, that, and the other thing. That's what makes this space so fascinating. And really why we chose packing, because it has all these crazy ripple effects.
Yeah. So James, from a business side, what size customers are you working with right now, and how big, what can you scale that to with what you already have out there in the marketplace?
Sure. We can really work with any size company. We have customers that ship a couple thousand shipments a month, all the way up to nearly 1 million a month.
Wow.
So pretty wide range there. The smaller you are, the kind of higher percentage savings on fulfillment that we've seen. But when we're, if we can save 6% on transportation costs for a really large shipper, because our solution is so lightweight, that's millions of dollars. So it's worth their time.
That makes total sense. And the implementation is, it's as simple as going over and trying the API, right? If you have a developer on your team, you can get in there right now and start to look at things and add some things in. And then if folks are interested in more, they just check out your website.
Yeah, Paccurate.io. They could also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, because I will keep talking, even go more into the weeds on cartonization with anybody.
Well, that's great. Thanks for being on the show. I'm excited about where you're going with this solution, and I'm glad to hear too that you can get down into the weeds and even into somebody who's doing 1,000 shipments a month. Because I can even think of clients that we have at the Process Fixer where it's like, hey, look, does this make sense, right? They are spitballing things, and many times spitballing is not. Like you said earlier, human beings are actually a lot worse at estimating things than you think, particularly future things, right? Where we have so many biases that it's very, very hard for us to make really good decisions. And things like calculating the dimensional space of a couple of items going into a box are much better left to software.
Yeah, and I can vouch for the fact that humans are bad, because we look at carton, pack plans all day, and we'll see one, we're like, wow, that one's amazing. It must be like 90% cubic utilization, and it ends up being like 65 or something. So we're not immune from that disability, I guess.
No, and listen, it's an overall problem with business in general, and you'd be shocked. So many people will tell me that aren't in the process business and the efficiency business, and they'll say, big companies are super efficient, and I just laugh. I'm like, you have no idea. We just did a project here in Arizona for a customer where we relayed out a warehouse for them. And by relaying out the warehouse and just moving item, this is like common. We just pulled a spreadsheet. We ranked everything. We sorted it. We did all that. How many items of these do we pick per day? Real basic math. And we had over 70% reduction in the amount of steps that people took and the amount and the distance that materials moved on a daily basis. Now, you take that out over the course of a year, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars in labor. And this is a company that's wildly profitable. Wildly profitable. And yet still there's inefficiency to be found in just about every place in your business. That happens in your software systems. It happens in your layouts. And as you just attested, it happens in your packaging.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll trade you another kind of economies of scale. So we tend to save around a square foot of cardboard per carton on average. So across all shipments. So not that Paccurate will necessarily optimize every single shipment sent around the world one day. However,
Sure.
to give a sense of scale, FedEx and UPS deliver a combined over 40 million packages per day. So let's say maybe only half of those are, good targets for optimization.
Yeah.
That's 20 million square feet of cardboard per day, which,
Wow.
we get some paper in the mail or cardboard. We think it's maybe a little bit greener than plastic. It is, but not by as much as we would like to think. I think
No.
the math is 1 ton of cardboard produces 3 tons of CO2 equivalent in manufacture. Yep. So these are massive economies of scale. And exactly to your point, these little tweaks can really add up.
Well, in closing, let me tell you another interesting story. There's a great book out there. He was a advisor for one of my companies years ago. I think the book was called Rubbish. And this guy, he was a garbageologist, and he worked for University of Arizona, I believe it was. And he went out, I'm Googling it in my other browser, but he would go take students from U of A and go out to landfills and do core samples. And they would drill down in, 100 feet, and they would pull this core sample out. And then they would analyze all of the stuff that was in that garbage. And I think many people think things like cardboard and newspaper, they'll break down. Well, they do in the right environment. But the absolute worst environment to break waste down is in a landfill. And the reason is because to break down paper or cardboard, you need moisture, you need oxygen, you need sunlight, all 3 things which do not exist inside of a landfill. Right. And what they would find is they would pull these core samples out, and they would find one example he gave is they found a fish wrapped up in a piece of newspaper, and the fish had not deteriorated, nor had the newspaper, but they knew the year that it was buried was 1947 because the date was on the newspaper. They were like, here's a 50-year-old fish that hasn't deteriorated in there. And so you don't think about, and his joke used to always be, we know that the Egyptians used to have plastic. And people would say, really? And he'd say, yeah, because we can find pieces of paper of theirs from 5,000 years ago that say that they had plastic. And people would be like, they do? And he'd be like, no, they didn't. I'm just pointing out that plastic deteriorates in 1,000 years. Their paper from 5,000 years is still laying on my desk. So if you don't understand the sustainability impact of how these things are, and when you can save tens, hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of this stuff going into the landfill, there's a huge environmental impact to that. So James, thanks so much. Say again the website. It's Paccurate.io.
Paccurate.io. Yeah, and you can sign up for a free trial, test it out, have fun. It's pretty fun to get started.
Very nice. James, thanks for being on the show, and thank you all for joining us on another edition of The Process Fixer. Until next time.
It's time to change the game. Let's go. Welcome to the Process Fixer, help you see the bigger picture. Derrick Mains is the elixir, cutting waste away like scissor. Woo! Got a problem, he can solve it. He's an expert with the process, so for sure you'll see a profit. Bottom line profit. Analyze the work your people doing every day. Expose the inefficiencies getting in the way. Advise you how to automate, outsource, abbreviate, eliminate, innovate. Now there's more food up on your dinner plate. COO and consultant for over 100 companies, Derrick is a professor on how to fix the process and maximize the profits. Come on. Welcome to the Process Fixer, help you see the bigger picture. Derrick Mains is the elixir, cutting waste away like scissor. Woo! Got a problem, he can solve it. He's an expert with the process, so for sure you'll see a profit. Come on. Yeah. Derrick Mains, the Process Fixer. Uh-huh.